Well, the first time I heard Teen Spirit was the first song they played in North Hollywood rehearsal studio. And Dave walked up and goes, "Hey, Butch, I'm Dave. Nice to meet you." And I go, "Cool, man." It was a pretty big room they were set up in. And I noticed there were no mics on Dave's kit. And Kurt had a big Mesa Boogie system set up on his guitar, and Chris had his SVT bass rig, and they're both really loud. I'm thinking, maybe should I put a kick and snare mic on the drums and run them through the wedges? And Nate goes, "Nah, you don't need it." And they kicked into Teen Spirit, and they played so ferociously, and Dave hit the drums so effing loud. I was just like, oh my God. But the hair in the back of my neck went up because the song was so good.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a notebook, and I was pacing around the room, and they finished it, and the sound, the cymbals, all sort of, the sound just died out, and Kurt said, "What do you think?" I go, "Play it again. It's awesome. Play it again." I just let me collect my thoughts. I hadn't written down any notes at all. I was just sort of blown away by it. And then I started taking notes on the songs, little tweaky things just to tighten up the arrangements and things. But man, they were good and so tight. I didn't know this until later that they had practiced pretty much every single day for 6 months before they came down to make Nevermind. So they were pretty focused.
Because early on you had worked with them with Chad. At that point, did you think this is the same band, or this band has taken another level with Dave at that point?
Well, I could kind of tell in that boombox recording because they sounded super tight, even though it was distorted. Yeah, you could just hear the feel of the band, and that's where I heard some of the new songs. So I know that Kurt had really upped his game in terms of melodic sensibility. You know, he was writing these anthems, but he was writing super hooky, you know, all the melodies, and just that's one of the reasons that record is so successful. The songs are really, really hooky.
Definitely. It's interesting. I was hearing this great story about the fact that you were telling Kurt early on, "I want you to double the vocals." And he was like, "Listen, that's not us." Ultimately, you talked to him about the Beatles and Lennon and really said to him, "Look at what John Lennon did." And that's kind of how you got him to agree to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, at first Kurt said he wanted to record the band au naturel. Let's just record it live, all set up in a vocal booth. Let's keep it all live. And I said, it's just going to sound like a live recording. You know, when you go into the studio, you use the studio and the tools available to make an album sound larger than life, to make it sound widescreen. You do that by adding harmonies and doubling vocals and doubling guitars and compression and EQ and effects and things like that. And he's like, "Oh, you know, whatever." But the first day when I asked him to double track his vocal, he said, I don't really want to do that. I just think it's fake." And I said, "Well, John Lennon did it on pretty much everything he sang." And then there's just a pause. And then Kurt said, "Okay, let's do it."
Do you think it was sort of him trying to stick with his punk rock kind of ethos? Like, I don't want to double the vocals, because ultimately all the bands I love, whether it be Fugazi or none of those guys would do something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a punk ethic thing that he was grappling with. He didn't want to stray too far from his roots. But that was a strange dichotomy working within the band, within Kurt's head, because he wanted to be huge. He wanted to make a big record. He had drawn all these things of them playing the Enormo Dome with like 50,000 people watching them. You know, he was swinging for the fences, but constantly grappling with, I have to stay true to my punk authenticity. And that was, you know, that haunted him through his whole career, through his whole life.